So the first characteristic of gang membership is social class. Official crime reports have found that juvenile delinquency is concentrated in lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. There is a strong relationship between lower class unemployment and poverty with high incidence of property crime. Some characteristics of gang members include coming from poor neighborhoods with substandard housing and having little hope for educational or occupational achievement. The book uses the phrase "code of the streets," which translates to "of hopelessness and poverty into violence." Howard and Barbara Myeroff observed middle-class gangs, and they found that they lacked alienated leadership and violent behavior that is often seen in lower-class gangs, did not demonstrate well-developed delinquent values, did not define themselves as delinquents or troublemakers, and eventually they expected themselves to abandon their deviant behaviors and become law-abiding citizens. The second characteristic is the straight edgers, and this was created by an ultra-conservative youth group called the Straight Edgers, which ran from 1995 to 1998. And these youths were the ones that reacted violently against other youth offenses like drug and alcohol use and the practice of casual sex. They actually take their name from a song called Straight Edge by Ian MacKaye. And the extreme hardcore straight edgers often use chains, mace, knives, clubs, beatings, brawls, and others to enforce their abstinent lifestyles to their peers. They also use the symbol X, which is also what clubs use to indicate anyone that is under 21. Arlene Levinston actually did a study of these straight edgers and found that the typical straight edger was white, male, middle class, and anywhere between early teens to early 20s. She found that the extreme ones were often strict vegetarians and were involved in violent crimes as part of the Animal Liberation Front. The final characteristic is racial and ethnic composition of gangs. And race and ethnicity are powerful forces that draw people into cohesive groups, especially if they feel like they have suffered some sort of injustice, which this leads to a strengthening of the bond. Davis found that race and ethnicity is unifying and sacred cause for gangs. Howard Erlanger's study focused on Hispanic Americans in East Los Angeles. He found that there is a deep resentment between Hispanic Americans and the educational system in East Los Angeles because the children were often punished for speaking Spanish in school, and in turn the children interpreted this as a rejection by the Anglo society. James Vigil also did a study, and he found that starting from the 1940s, youth groups had periodic outbursts of destructive behavior, but by the 1990s they had become violent and deadly. He concluded that about 4 to 10% of Mexican American youths belong to gangs, but the National Gang Center puts this number closer to 12%. Most gang members are African American or Hispanics, but there is a new emergence of Vietnamese gangs, and these gangs are often concentrated and emerged from Vietnamese communities in California. They use violence, robbery, bombs, extortions, and murders as terror tactics, and they usually disband after a 3 to 4 day rampage and eventually fade into the general population. A majority of these gangs are homogeneous in race and ethnicity, but some have variants, especially in neighborhoods where housing is well integrated, and which Corbin and Peluso found that the dominant race held higher positions of power within the group.